Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Switch Statement Podcast. It's a podcast for investigations into miscellaneous tech topics.
This is our first episode on Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson.
Hey, John. What's going on?
Hello, Matt. Everything is going great. How are you doing?
I am doing all right.
Ready to start a new book?
New book! After
book.
only a year?
Yeah.
It only took us a year to read our last book. That's pretty good, I think.
Dude, that's so insane.
Dude, I think if we manage to read this book in 9 months, that'll be amazing.
Yeah.
A tremendous feat.
Slowly improving.
So how many new paradigms of thinking about the world or information theory were introduced in this chapter? Zero.
Yeah, so the nature of this book is quite different from Gödel Escherbach, which was packed with a density of ideas that was kind of astounding. This book...
Yeah,
I mean, this is a Elon Musk biography, so I think it's going to be far less sort of mentally explosive, but also interesting in a lot of ways.
Mentally explosive. Dude,
Yeah,
I love
dude.
that.
Gödel Escherbach, mentally explosive. Like, there was so many new ideas in there, and which is crazy because it was from 79 or whatever. But that book was amazing.
So this book starts at the start. We see the kind of tumultuous upbringing of Elon Musk in South Africa.
Yeah, did you read the intro?
I read the prologue.
Yeah.
Was there an intro before the prologue?
That's probably what I mean. I wrote an intro in my notes. But yeah, I mean, his childhood was rough. Like, it sounded very, just one big example that stood out to me was this thing called Veld School.
Dude, I think we need to bring Veld School to America, frankly.
I agree, man. I mean, kids should be subjected to Lord of the Flies, Coliseum-style combat contests or / survival contests in order to figure out which the best ones. Where
the counselors tell the children not to be a weak dumb fuck.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that apparently, well, and I know we've talked about this before, but apparently in order to be a truly successful person, you need to have just this terrible broken upbringing where there's like a decent amount of violence in your life.
Which this is something I want to continue to pick apart as we read this book, because I've sort of thought that, America really, well, and I always say America, that's just because I'm from the United States and this is my background, but I feel like we idolize these people who are like clearly narcissists, clearly abusive and cruel to those around them. But they do amazing things. But then you also have to ask yourself the question of like, what are they actually doing? And there's also this concept of like, is the world just poised to accomplish something and they just so happen to kind of weasel their way into it? Or they make something happen maybe a couple years earlier than it would have happened had normal things, just gone through their course.
I mean, this does raise a really interesting question, and it challenges, I think, an assumption that I have, which is teams that have better psychological safety. And actually, this is something that I feel like Google would regularly repeat, is that teams with higher psychological safety, where members feel that they can make mistakes without fear of like retribution or being judged by, those teams are more productive. But this book kind of raises a counter to that, which is like, no, you need a boss who is just constantly cracking the whip and like relentless and saying, if you're not here till 2 a.m.
Sleeps under his desk
and expects everyone else to do the same. That's apparently how you have a really productive team.
Evidently, yeah. But maybe we can sort of table this, because we'll discuss this.
That's a little further down the line.
I do want to say what Veld School even is. So apparently, and I don't know, correct me if I get this wrong, I didn't write too much in my notes, but it's basically this survival camp that if you were a South African at the time, you would sort of send your kids on over the summer. Like instead of music camp, they go to veld school. And it's like this thing where you get a little bit of survival equipment and then you just go off in the woods. It sounds like there's very little adult supervision. And what would apparently happen is kids would just basically on day one would like fight over the resources. And so the strong kids would just take all the, good tents and good food and whatever. And then a little weak, nerdy kid like Elon would just get the crap beat out of him and he would be left with nothing.
Yeah.
And so this was a very formative, period for him because he was just learning that the world is this brutal place. And yeah, that's Veld School.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So they talked about how apparently they would give everyone a very small amount of food and then they would basically expect them to fight over it, like to steal food from the other children. It's just wild. And I mean, I guess the idea is that South Africa was so violent at the time that you kind of needed to imbue your children with this toughness. And I think this was kind of a way to toughen up your child in a context where nothing too terrible was going to go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And his father, who is a character we'll talk about a lot, his father sounds like a horrible person. I'm just going to come out and say that.
Yeah, Errol.
Errol Musk was very pro Veld School. It seemed like Errol Musk was the type who wanted his children to be subjected to this crucible of fire where their metal would be tested and like they would come out better, I guess. There was a period where Elon Musk got kind of horribly beaten up. I think it was during this Veld School thing. And his father sided with the kid who beat him up.
Yeah.
Basically because I guess the kid who beat him up had lost his father. And so Errol Musk was like, he's lashing out because he lost his father. And therefore he was in the right. I don't know. It's weird. But anyway, I can't even imagine how that must have felt for Elon, who's, basically sitting in the hospital and his dad comes in and is like siding with the kid who beat him up. Like, it's just messed up.
Yeah. And it's really hard to know who to trust in terms of this recounting of events, because apparently both Elon and his brother Kimball say he completely made up that whole father just died to suicide thing. So
yeah, that's true.
Or rather, just that Elon provoked it.
Right, and Errol, very much unreliable, testimony or however you want to call it. Walter Isaacson, he basically interviewed all of these people, and whenever he mentions stuff that Errol said, I feel like he's constantly like prefacing it or sort of giving context that Errol basically might be lying.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting.
I mean, at least in one case, the author is literally like, listen, we have hard evidence to indicate that this is not what this is not how he was saying this.
Yeah. Yeah, which just makes, Errol is this scum of the earth person, it seems like, but he's also kind of a tragic figure in that, I don't know, he wants people to remember him fondly, but his actions, spoke louder than words, I guess, and he was a jerk. So people, I guess this is a lesson. It's like, if you're a jerk, people are going to remember that you're a jerk, and that will be your legacy.
Yeah. Well, so we learn, to that end, we learn that Errol and May, Elon's mother, they split up. Because Errol is such a crazy person. And again, this is another instance where Errol very clearly claims where he never hit his wife. He never did X, Y, and Z. But then May is like, no, he lunged at me. He was upset at me and he was going to try to seriously hurt me. So that was the last straw.
Yep.
And there's just one really hilarious line there, which I was just like, it just smacked of so much. Yeah. So the quote was, "I've never laid a hand on a woman in my life, and certainly none of my wives." And it was just like there. It's just such an unintentionally hilarious quote because it's like there's no self reflection there. Like, wait a minute, I've apparently had enough wives at this point that there's more than two apparently,
Yeah.
and there's no reflection to be like, oh, you know what, maybe this is me. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
the reason why I'm now on at least my third wife.
Yeah, well, and I think this is one of the reasons it's so important to analyze Errol if you're trying to understand Elon, because you can see a lot of Errol's attributes in Elon. And
Yeah.
we're going to see this over and over again. I mean, Errol was like this delusional asshole, basically, making up realities to support, what he wanted to do and his visions. And you can sort of see a lot of the same thing in Elon. Also, the same sort of, and some, I don't want to make it all sound negative. Like, Errol was very courageous. He was like a pilot. He did a lot of very adventurous things, and sort of, I would say, had a healthy amount of recklessness. Well, I don't know what a healthy amount of recklessness is, but I think he instilled sort of a risk-taking
Yeah.
appetite in Elon, which definitely led to some of his success. So,
Yeah.
but I wanted to mention one last quote from the intro. There's a good quote where Steve Wozniak was talking about Steve Jobs, and he says, "Did he have to be so cruel, so rough and drama addicted?"
Yeah.
And then he kind of goes on to say something along the lines of like, Apple probably would not have been half of what it was without that. And I don't know. I just want to mention that quote because that's something I personally want to continue to sort of interrogate is like, do these leaders need to be like this? And I think that's probably going to come up a lot in this book.
It is weird because what I see Steve Jobs as doing is holding Apple to an incredibly high standard. And it's just not obvious to me that you need to be a dick to do that.
Yeah, I would claim that you don't. I think there's plenty of good leadership that I've observed where that doesn't happen and where everyone feels safe and productive. But then again, I've never been a part of a team that builds like a multi-billion-dollar company. So I don't know.
I think about Google, and I do think for a really long time, Google had a fantastic culture, and they were delivering incredible products. And
Yeah.
I do wonder, and I don't know, I think I don't get the sense that Larry Page and Sergey Brin were ever such major assholes. Like, and again, I think they kind of struck this balance of holding people to high standards, but not being a dick while they do it.
I agree with you that what I observed at Google was a good culture. Although, I mean, I don't necessarily want to talk about the last few years at Google. I think the culture has eroded at Google. It's become more of a corporate entity that has sort of filtered down even to the lowest ranking engineers. But yeah, for the most part, Google was a positive place. And certainly Sundar instilled like a very positive vibe. And yeah, I guess you could make an argument that some of that allowed Google to become complacent or hurt the culture in a way. But yeah, I think I generally agree that Google had a good culture. It certainly didn't have this Elon Musk style culture.
Oh yeah, I never experienced anything like that.
But one of my main takeaways from these first few chapters is Elon Musk did not have good role models.
No.
Like, his father was horrible. His mother seems great, but also she had her own struggles. I mean, she divorced his father and sort of had financial struggles. Like, he wasn't surrounded by a lot of loving relationships.
Well, the other thing with her is she seemed like a nice person, but it also seemed like she was not maybe a great judge of character in terms of
Yeah.
her love interests. It
Yes.
sounds like subsequent people that she got into relationships with were as bad, if not worse, in some ways than Errol.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
I mean, wasn't there one that was physically abusive?
I think so. I don't have the quote, but
But yeah, in any case, your point stands. Like that, she did not pick good dudes. Sadly, you get a little in these early chapters. You do get a little bit of inkling of Elon's proclivities or his interest in technology and programming even more specifically. Like in his classes, he'll take like religious studies and get like an E. He has a very strong like if he doesn't care about something, he's not going to do well in it. He reads this book called Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which is a Heinlein book. Awesome book, by the way. I read that when I was a kid. But it's kind of asks these questions of like, is AI good or bad? Hitchhiker's Guide, he loved. They mentioned this thing called, I think it was called Seeker that he built, which was this game. Is that what the game was called?
yeah, let me see. Because he made Blastar, but I don't know.
Oh, okay. Seeker was something else, but I guess he made Blastar with Pascal and Turbo C++, which I'd never heard of Turbo C++. I had to look it up. I guess it's like an integrated development environment that uses C++.
Because I have heard of Turbo Pascal. So
I've never heard of that either.
I guess it's probably just a line of IDEs.
Yeah.
Which it's cool. I don't know. This is an aside, but I feel like for a while there, it was kind of like you would have an IDE that was tailored to the language that you were writing in, where it was like, there's like PyCharm and Sea Lion and
Yeah.
JetBrains, and I just like that we've kind of moved away. It's like, nope, you have to do pretty much the same thing in all those different contexts. So we're not going to have 7 different IDEs for every programming language you're using.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm very glad we moved beyond that. I also just feel like so many projects are like multi-language that it just kind of doesn't make sense. But
So yeah, I mean, we hear he dips a toe. It almost felt like we were starting to get into Masters of Doom again. You talked about Blastar and making programming video games, and he sold one of his video games to a magazine, and it's funny because I have heard people talk about how he's kind of a poser when it comes to video games. Like he pays someone to play for some game.
yeah.
And this actually kind of contradicts that, because he's OG in terms of video games. Like this has been a lifelong passion for him.
Yeah, he definitely is. He's not a poser in that regard. Also, I've heard people say similar things about like the Quake competition, and it turns out him and his team did do really well in a Quake competition.
Yeah.
So I mean, he does have a background in video games, although he did recently lie about his achievement in some dumb game. I can't even remember what it was, like Diablo 4 or something.
Yeah, that was the most recent thing. Is like they were like he was very clearly he was making mistakes in the UI that if you had actually gotten a character to that level, that you would have done 10,000 times.
Yep. Yeah, and this is such an interesting theme with Musk, is like a lot of times he does have the capability or the intelligence to back something up, but then in the same breath he'll lie or he'll over exaggerate or show these sort of narcissistic qualities. And it's kind of like, I feel like if he just stuck to the truth and like discussed his actual achievements and whatever, like he'd be fine. But I think he just he's always striving for like the next thing and to be better and bigger, and I don't know, it's just
And
ridiculous.
again, I mean, that has to do with this like aggrandizement from his father, where it always has to be this crazy story. And
Yeah.
I think that he kind of he is doing the same thing.
Yep, 100%. And speaking of his father's aggrandizement, there was this hilarious part where his dad was talking about like casino roulette, which I guess his dad thought that he had like figured out roulette.
Probability.
Yeah. And there's this hilarious section in the book where his dad is giving this monologue about like, oh yeah, there's no such thing as randomness. It's just the Fibonacci sequence, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. It just struck me as like, man, just imagine if your dad was like going on and on about this nonsense. And yeah, yet another. Have you ever heard of teriology?
Oh yeah, that's 1 times 1 equals. Oh wait, 1 times 1 equals 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It very much had a teriology vibe to me. It's weird how people, I don't know, get caught up in these like math things that are just clearly wrong.
It's funny because I feel like I've thought about this before, where the human mind is this fantastic, fantastically complex machine. And a machine that's incredibly complicated can actually fall victim to, fall into these very low minima of performance.
Yeah.
When it's so flexible, it can be really amazing, but then it also can be incredibly terrible.
Right. Yeah, and that appears to have happened with a person like Errol, where because I mean, Errol does seem to be like a very smart guy. Like he was successful in certain.
He was an
regards.
engineer, right? Wasn't he an engineer?
He was an engineer, yeah. So he clearly had a lot of aptitude, but yeah, I think like you're saying, he lived on a razor's edge, and at some point he sort of went over to the other side.
But so there was a point in this chapter where he talks about deciding whether or not he wanted to build video games, and maybe this kind of starts to dip into the next section, or do something else. And there was a moment where like this could have been the next chapter in Masters of Doom, but like he or I guess like in the history of video game development, but he wanted, like, he had bigger visions for himself, and he wanted to aspire more greatly. And but yeah, go for it.
Sorry, this is something that impresses me about Elon. I'm always impressed with people who, from a very young age, can just clearly see what their life is going to be about.
Yeah.
And it seems like Elon is one of those people where he just knew that video games weren't going to be big enough for him. He wanted to have a very high level of impact on human society.
Exactly.
Which is impressive. I mean, for like a 15-year-old to have those thoughts is kind of amazing. Well, and I think a lot of 15-year-olds have those thoughts and they're just delusional, but I think, I mean, obviously he has had a massive impact, so I think, maybe he was one of the few that knew he had the minerals to back it up.
It's so funny because I think a lot of 15-year-olds, they're not even really thinking about that.
Right. Yeah, I certainly wasn't.
They're just like, I just want to play video games. I just want to get to the next level and
kiss a girl, or
yeah, exactly. And I think even as people get older, I think for a lot of people, they don't have a longer term plan, essentially. And I mean, it's funny because I certainly have never had as any plans as long. I mean, I guess very, very few people have plans like on the level of Elon Musk, who starting in the 90s, he was already thinking about making Earth multiplanetary, or making human civilization multiplanetary. So this is now going on like 40 years or 30 years at least that he's working towards this.
Yeah. Yep. So he could sort of tell that his future was going to be in the United States.
Yeah.
And he made this move to go to Canada because that was kind of a good first step to getting into the United States. And so he was trying to pick between universities that he could attend. And he was looking at Waterloo and Queens. And I guess he picked Queens because it had girls.
Yeah, that was so funny. And like, because Waterloo is an incredible school, like a great
huge
school. Yeah.
Big engineering school too. A lot of, there's a Google office in that area, and, a lot of great engineers come from Waterloo.
There's actually a very interesting part of this, where he talks about going to Canada. He basically just decided himself and went to Canada alone. And, his parents gave him like $4,000. And some people talk about how, like Elon Musk had his super rich father, and that really did not bear out.
Not really, yeah.
His father did have some like emerald mine or something, but for one uninteresting reason or another, it basically became worthless.
Right.
Even though
he had a Rolls Royce at some point, but he was kind of a grifter. Like he just occasionally he had a lot of money and then he would spend it all.
Yeah. Yeah. But so what that means is Musk showed up in Canada with not much more than the clothing on his back, basically. So
yeah, and like you're saying, he like willed himself to Canada. This whole legend of Musk where he had all this money and was able to do this. It's
had a silver spoon in his mouth. Yeah,
exactly.
But that the other thing is he picked Canada because he could go there solo. Like the requirements in terms of the applications for the visas were just something that he could pull off. And then his plan was eventually just start in Canada, and then eventually he would go to the United States.
Right. Yeah, and he sort of quickly discovered that he wanted to ride this internet wave. Mm-hmm. He went to Penn, so this was sort of his entry into the United States. He had several internships. Well, I guess two main internships, one during the day and one at night, which kind of speaks to his work ethic. But they mention a couple instances where he was fixing these like really hairy like bugs with DOS multitasking. He had an aptitude with physical like components, which is another thing that's not very common. Like me personally, I really only understand computer science. I think you have a much stronger background with both computer science and physical components, which I've always thought was awesome. But I think, for someone like Elon Musk to sort of have a brilliance with both the programming side of things and, more of the hands-on side of things does kind of speak to his capability, which I feel like this is another thing that goes around about Elon, is that he's a faker or a poser with his technical abilities. And again, I don't think that's true. I think there's cases where he's exaggerated his technical abilities or where he's said things that are very dubious. But at the same time, he has clearly shown very strong technical ability.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but I think this was just an early case where he was like fixing these crazy bugs that even seasoned engineers couldn't handle.
Yeah, that was one where it was like, okay, clearly he has, they talk about that bug where they're like all of the other engineers on the team could not fix it, but he swooped in and fixed it in 2 weeks or whatever. So it's the sense that I'm getting is that his expertise is kind of like lumpy almost, like where he'll spend like he'll focus super hard on one issue and he will achieve a tremendous amount like in that one domain.
Yeah.
And then sometimes that will cause him to have like this hubris about everything, which is not true. He doesn't have that level everywhere, but he is able to achieve it kind of anywhere he points his focus. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think lumpy is such a good word to describe it because it's like later on they mentioned this part where like his own technical lead was wrestling with this like Oracle database issue from Unix or something. And Elon didn't, from all appearances, like he was a Windows guy. Like he didn't seem to care about this stuff, but he just knew the answer.
Yeah.
And so it does seem like Elon has these like random bits and pieces of just insanely deep knowledge or capability. But then he also has these massive gaps where, and when those gaps come up, he just fakes it. He just makes shit up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is interesting. But in any case, we're sort of running up to his entry into, Silicon Valley and like being an entrepreneur. And I thought this would be maybe a good place to end the first episode.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, we're right at this internet wave, and he said, this is going to be an opportunity that only comes along once in a lifetime. He's deciding whether or not he wants to get his PhD, and he decides like most PhDs are irrelevant, and so yeah, he decides to make the move to Silicon Valley and try to make it in this new internet realm.
Yep, drop out of college, people, because that's what all successful people seem to do.
He did. Did he get his master's at Penn?
I recall a part where he had asked a professor, he said, I'm going to go try to make it as an entrepreneur. Can I please come back if I fail? And the professor was like, sure, you can come back, but I'll never see you again.
I don't think you're coming back. So he got his bachelor's, but he never did any graduate study.
Well, my understanding is, and I could be missing something, but he went to Queens. Did he get his bachelor's at Queens and then he dropped out of Penn?
And this is the thing. I was thinking, did he transfer? Yeah, he got bored at Queens. He transferred to Penn because they gave him basically a full ride.
Okay, so he was still working on his bachelor's when he transferred to Penn.
And I think that he did. My sense was that he did complete his bachelor's at Penn, and then he was deciding what to do afterwards. But I could be misremembering that. Anyway, the particulars are not too important. But he does.
Okay, so stay in school. Stay in school.
I think get your bachelor's, and everything else is a waste, because that's what I did. And so I tell everyone else that because I want to feel like I didn't miss something.
Yeah.
All right. I will see you next time to see where Elon goes, the waves he creates in the internet.
Heck yeah. See you next time, Matt.